Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Sofia Likouris from the University of Edinburgh, and we welcome you all to the first live broadcast of the online Circle Symposium of 2014. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, Professor Simon Biggs and Dr. Sue Hawksley from Australia, the University of South Australia, and my colleague Dr. Penny Travlou from the University of Edinburgh. And we're going to have together a discussion about Netculture and online communities. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's show people. Okay, so this is Penny. Hi, Penny.
Hi, hello.
And this is Simon and Sue from Australia. Okay, so I think we should just start discussing the concept of online community, to come up with some definitions about that, and then we can continue with examples of online communities you three are familiar with and have worked in the past and you continue to work. So who would like to start?
I don't know.
Well, Penny.
Okay,
yes.
Simon?
You want to outline how you came to define online communities in the OMSET project?
Yes. Can I just say
and how you
I'm sorry, Simon. Simon, I'm sorry, 1 second. Can you move a little bit so that you are in the frame? Because I can't see you very clearly. Yes, and when Sue talks, then she can move herself. Okay? Fantastic. All right.
So,
okay,
yeah, Penny,
let's start again.
Perhaps if Penny outlines how she came to define online communities in the OMSET project, because I think that was a very good definition.
Okay, it's not an easy thing, Simon, but anyway, I'll try. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry because I will read through notes and stuff. It's a good thing for all of us and for the audience out there to remind or how the general definition of online communities is. So we could say that an online community is more or less a group of people with common interests who use the internet. At least this is a very broad definition of online communities. So you could use it for, through websites, email, instant messages, messaging forums, etc., as a way to communicate, work together, and pursue their interests over time. So in a sense, and this is quite debatable, obviously, for various reasons, we could even say that people who gather through smaller groups on Facebook, they kind of being within an online community, or even, for example, groups of, I'll say, skateboard enthusiasts who kind of videotape, discuss afterwards their, the videos online on the different spaces, the skateboard. They bring this, they are as well an online community. So this is, let's say, the general, more or less, definition of an online community. But as Simon said, things are a little bit more complex when it comes down, for example, doing a specific work, research, let's say, with online communities. So in my case, I was involved in ELMSIP, which is the acronym for EU HERA-funded project, which is electronic literature as a model of creativity in practice. So there I did, I carried out ethnographic research with let's say, communities of mainly digital practitioners, including online communities that those practitioners use, and artists as well. So there, I mean, it came something extra to the online community-based network. So we could say, for example, in that case, that the network communities more or less focus on type of social relationships and are not just geographically restricted. So network communities do not, let's say, require physical evidence, locality, or full commitment. But I mean, I'm just giving a broad understanding, let's say, of these terms. And obviously, my interest was how, looking on these particular communities, we could understand the community formation while these people come together, and how through creative practices, let's say, they make this community, enable this community to take a form, or strengthen a community in other cases. So I'll finish it here, and I could give examples later on.
Okay.
Well, I think the key thing there is that Penny mentioned that a bunch of skateboard enthusiasts working online together can be a community, online community, and that's absolutely true. But as with anything, there's a difference between people who, not just in people, but there's a difference in the nature of activities where people might be doing something because they want to, and only because they want to, and people are doing something in a more reflexive or self-reflective, critical manner. And so I think that the sort of communities that we were looking at in the Embodiment project, and which we're all part of ourselves, the various communities we're part of, what characterizes those communities is that they are online communities that are self-reflective about the reasons why they exist and about how the mediality of their existence is a function of that. So they're actually, the community is made up of people who are interested in considering how the nature of the online media characterize particular kinds of community on one side of the equation, and on the other side of the equation, why people want to get involved in that kind of community. What is it about that kind of mediality that attracts them? Because obviously you can go down to the, I'm sort of flashing back to sort of American graffiti 1950s, but you could go down to the milk bar and be at your face-to-face community with a bunch of other teenagers, for example, or skateboarders if that's your thing. And that's a very successful form of community. It's been going for millennia, that kind of community. So what is it about online communities that are interesting? Why do some people gravitate to them? What value do they find? What comes out of that? And what are the implications for community formation and, subsequent to that, the formation of individuals, because individuals are very much created within the context of the communities they exist within.
Can I ask one question, a very sort of simple question for me who is not very knowledgeable in this area? Talking about the skateboarders, the skateboarders have a Facebook page through which they communicate, and I actually know this because one of my own projects has with skateboarders, and they have a group in the Facebook which is also a closed group. I can't access it, the groups that I want to. So can we say something about the difference between the way the Facebook is being used by the skateboarders and these other groups where the mediality of the system is quite crucial? The way Simon introduced that.
Yeah. I don't know. Shall I talk about it a little bit? I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to obviously reflect in a very, let's say, I will improvise, because these are things that you just throw on the table, Sophia, which are quite, I'm thinking quite a lot on them lately, because I'm using Facebook for my research quite heavily. And what I'm saying, what I mean by that is that I follow and I'm actively part of communities within Facebook, like the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, which is, in a sense, you could say, why do they use Facebook when they have their own wiki interface where you could actually blog in and add things there, but at the same time have a Facebook have say page where it becomes a real community. And this is something which I'm quite puzzled quite often, but somehow the thing with Facebook, obviously we know very well that there is somebody behind it that makes the money out of using you as a user, the Facebook, whereas you could say that other communities which are outside Facebook and they have, let's say, more of an ownership of not only the content but the platform as well, is quite of an interest here and a contrast with the Facebook. However, I would say so that the content, at least of my experience so far, doesn't have a difference really. Those who I see being on the other independent, let's say, online community platforms are as well members and of that particular community within Facebook, and they say exactly the same thing. It's a matter, however, when we come down on ownership of the material, because obviously Facebook really owns at the end of the day the material. So it's an issue of what happens to this kind of documents, let's say, and documentation. So it's not actually an answer more than a reflection on the presence of communities or formation of communities within Facebook as well. And I'm just giving one example, as there are quite a lot of examples, even those who come from the very left field, using Facebook as a way to interact and connect and network with other people with similar interests.
Okay, I'll just pass to Simon and Sue in case they've got something to add to this.
Only that I think part of Facebook's success is that it's a relatively media-rich social networking tool compared to other tools. And for people that want that sort of media richness, they want video, they want pictures, they want music, and all these different media in the same place that they can work with, then Facebook is excellent. It solves a lot of technical problems, and that's where Facebook is generating its business model. Well, and that and the advertising. Personally, I don't use Facebook, and the two social media that I find most interesting are Listservs, which are one of the oldest. They've been around since before the web, so since the 80s, and what we call bulletin board services, BBSs. And these are purely textual. All you can do is write and read, and you send messages to each other. And I actually really like that medium because it's, to me, highly discursive, relatively thoughtful, because you have to think carefully about what you're writing. You don't tend to write off the cuff. You tend to work in a more considerate manner. And then the other social media I use a lot is Twitter. Mainly, again, because it's such a constrained medium. You only have 149 characters to make any meaning with, and that's it. If you're very clever, you can make something more of it than that, but basically that's it. And that brevity, that low, eye of a needle, I actually like. It's a sort of discipline, a constraint that you can work with to say things that in other media would be easier, and that's the problem. It's good to say them in that medium because they're harder, if that makes sense. It makes you think twice about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Kind of agree with Simon, because you bring something here with mediality and textuality actually that listservs are basically, as you said, based on text, and you have to be very careful on the way you work on the text, because this is the main, not the main, the only medium actually of communication, and strengthen and sustain the, let's say, the community. Whereas Facebook somehow is used quite often as a news bulletin, if I can say so. If I can say so, for example, when I say that I'm, let's say, one day of looking on Facebook on what is posted on the P2P research cluster is mainly actually news of interesting projects, and what happens as a reaction of, say, of community members is the like button that you put likes. So your interaction then with whatever is produced is uploaded on this particular page on Facebook is actually mostly likes, and in some cases kind of a kind of a thread of communication between the author and comments of various group members. But whereas when we talk, and I could talk later in the discussion about online communities like I don't know, like net behavior, which I'll talk in more detail, there is text, and quite often there is a theme or a topic that people contribute to. That creates a reflective discussion rather than just commenting on a certain email about some news or some kind of event happening.
Okay, I would like to go now to the specific communities that you have in mind to introduce. But before we do that, maybe we can say something about this new virtual reality element, this Oculus thing that they are thinking to add in Facebook, and maybe have a little bit of Sue's input on that in terms of Sue's specialism about the presence and live body and physicality, multisensory arrangements and setups.
Yeah, so I don't use Facebook as well, so it's quite interesting to me. It's rather abstract that Facebook have just bought the Oculus Rift, which various artists have been exploring over, and Simon's been working on something for the last 2 years, yeah. Mm-hmm. As a piece of technology, it's super exciting in what it could offer for distant communication, for transforming the experience of yourself, and perhaps creating an experience of as if embodied, present with somebody who is not there. So potentially we might be able to have this discussion with a sense of our own bodily presences, which we already have a sense. We have a representation through the video, but as we know, as soon as we switch on video, we're getting a bit precarious as to whether the system will fall over. If we went to just voice, would be easier. If we went to low bandwidth text, we know we're pretty safe. So I'm very intrigued by what will be added in a sort of Facebook type scenario by having a very high-end technology, quite a complex technology, which also produces quite complex embodied phenomena for people to deal with, when one of the things that I think being online has offered is we can work at different times, we can work in our own places, we can post stuff, we don't have to be physically present. We also don't have to negotiate the kind of bodily encounter, which is a whole other layer of communication that people have to deal with. So one of the beauties, particularly of, say, a text-only online space, is it frees up from that difficulty of needing to be in the same time relationship. Although I should also say, in terms of Facebook, I'm not a user, but I do notice my child who does use it, he and his friends' preferred mode is chat mode, which means they are present. They are writing in real time to each other. They don't like posting stuff and reading it later. So there is something about feeling like they are present to each other that certainly the younger kids seem to like that more, and they think we're really old-fashioned for kind of posting the night before in Australia, and then we go to bed and you read it when you get up. That suits us, you know. So perhaps for them, the idea of being present through a device like the Oculus Rift, perhaps that's absolutely the way it goes. But then I sort of flip and think, what would be added to a more discursive community such as Empire, for example, which is a discussion listserv? What would be added to that discussion by having a kind of 3D environment experience, embodied experience? I can't imagine how it would add to the discussion. It could certainly be used in all sorts of other ways, but the beauty of it being very textual to me is that not only can it be outside of location and time, that the discussion can nonetheless remain intact, but also by being a network, it can actually be very broad, and so it's not a small community, it's not only the people who sit in the cafe, and you can sort of, there will be strands that are beyond what you want to read, but you can kind of focus on the bits that meet your interests or meet your time. And again, if you have to be sort of physically present, that choice becomes harder. So I'm really interested to see what it might add, or how it will augment and change the nature of those discussions.
That's a very interesting point, Sue. I will probably reverse it a bit or subvert it, because okay, months ago, for something completely different, I went to the launch of a book, which was actually the letters of Ian Finlay Hamilton, the founder of Little Sparta, with art historian Stephen Bunn. And what is interesting is a kind of a communication between the two on a very textual, obviously, because it's epistemology. And you get, through reading this particular very rich information in these letters, almost like being present in the lives of these two individuals. So if we take this and we kind of, reflect in relation to a larger community, which is based still on text, there is a certain quality on the information and the way you get this information generated and projected to the rest of the community. So in a sense, we may argue that the Oculus could open up new possibilities, but at the same time, it may restrict the already existing perfectly, communicated textual narratives between individuals in these particular network communities. I mean, this is my own opinion, actually. Not that I want to be a romanticizing on keeping the text as a form and the writing of the sake of writing, but about the type of information and quality of information we get through text.
Can we maybe have some information about Empire as a list, as a project, for guests here and people who don't know this, so that then we can sort of link back to these questions?
Yeah. So
okay.
Empire started as a listserv discussion as part of the PhD project of a PhD student in Sydney at the time called Melinda Rackham, and she invited me and a group of people to be part of that discussion. Now that was back in about 2002, something like that. So 12 years ago, and maybe even slightly before. And that she finished her PhD, and then at the end of the PhD, she decided to let it keep running as a community rather than as her own listserv, and it did. And then she stood down from being the coordinator of it, and it was based at the University of New South Wales, maintained there. And then Tim Murray, who's a professor of comparative literature at Cornell in upstate New York, became the coordinator of the listserv, and also Renato Murray. So they've been coordinating it since probably about 2006 or 2007. And at the moment there are 4 coordinators, which are the 2 of them, Pat Lichty, who's a professor at Columbia College of Art in Chicago, and myself here in Adelaide. And it works on the basis of every month we have a different theme, and we invite between 8 and 16 people to be respondents to the theme, and they are all briefed about the theme, and then there's a structured debate on that theme, and then the list members, of which there are about 2,000 or 3,000 at the moment, it oscillates a bit, can email in as they wish. I mean, that is part of the discussion as well. So it's basically a curated forum, and but it's not highly organized. It's curated, but it's got a lot of flexibility, and there's no censorship or anything like that. There's pretty strict spam filtering, and only list members can post. So it's a low-band list, let's put it that way. There's not hundreds of messages a day, maybe a dozen. It's quite, to give it some sense of its identity, it's quite different to net behavior, which is the listserv run by Furtherfield that was the subject of Penny's ethnographic study. Net behavior is not thematically based, and it's not curated. It has about, I think, 4,000 members. Is that right, Penny?
It has 1,000 active members, but I suspect that the larger community is, yes, it's around 4,000.
Yeah, and it's an open discussion which just goes on. I mean, there's nobody curating it or driving it. It is owned, like any listserv must be owned by somebody. They've got to be responsible for it, and server. And that's run by Furtherfield in London. And Penny can talk more about that. I think what's interesting about all these listservs is that, and I'm sure Penny will pick up on this very strongly in a moment, but I was saying about Empire, is that most of the people on the list don't know each other. But the people that really drive it do know each other. And they've known each other often for many years, mainly online, but they do know each other offline as well, face-to-face, and basically have relationships that are friendly and intellectually mutually respectful. And I think that's terrifically important to the sustainability of these lists. Obviously, there are many lists. There are far fewer lists now than there used to be. And it's always interesting to ask yourself, why is this list still going after 10 or 12 years? Whereas this other list that was so amazing in 2007 or 2003, why is that not going anymore? Because it was so great back then. And I've named 7-Eleven or NetTime or Hell. These are all great listservs that just don't function anymore. But yeah, this thing about the offline part is very important. And I think Penny can talk about that. And I think also the offline thing is important in terms of how we consider what the role of embodiment might be
Mm-hmm.
in online forums, because offline is embodiment. That's how you define offline. It's embodied. And online is disembodied. So when you start bringing degrees of embodiment, nobody's talking about real embodiment, but degrees of embodiment, representations of embodiment into the disembodied medium of the online world, what's happening? Are we closing a gap or are we creating a new gap? This is a really interesting question. Now, I'll just let Penny talk about the offline dimension of net behavior.
Yeah, thanks, Simon, because you kind of covered a couple of the information about net behavior. But just before discussing net behavior, I think I need to talk about Featherfield, because it's obviously how it is formed, actually, net behavior. So Featherfield is not well, in order to define it, it's a matter of from which position you stand in front of, let's say, Featherfield or Featherfielders, because they define their community as organization, institution, gallery, or even an idea, depending on how and who is they're trying to inform about Featherfield. But it started as a, let's say, as a concept and idea, and as a need from two young artists in late 90s, Mark Garrett and Ruth Catlow, who at that time they were really disillusioned with the art world in UK, and particularly in London, and feeling that the net art, let's say, and anything that had to do with computers and art and technology were really in the margins of what was becoming at the time very powerful art community in London. If we think of Tracy Emin, for example, and the Such and Such gallery. So this is how Featherfield started as an idea, and in the early 2000s they got funding from the Arts Council in England to develop the idea to an organization and obviously to the community of Featherfield with a gallery which has had a physical location in North London at the time until 2011, and digital presence as well through various routes. One of these routes, let's say, is net behavior, which is, we could say it's probably something like an open email list community, which is engaged the progress of sharing and actively evolving critical approaches, methods, and ideas focused around contemporary networked media arts practice. And not only that, through my own actually observations, I realized that the discussion has gone beyond media arts practices. And the people who are involved are media artists, researchers, academic scholars, soft groups, writers, coders, programmers, curators, independent theories, activists, and so on. To just give you an idea. And as I said earlier, the active members are 1,000 people. And then I think the larger community, including the gallery members, meaning the Featherfield Gallery and Featherfield Commons, which is another kind of space at the moment in Finsbury Park, are about 25,000. I mean, this number may sound really an extreme, but we're talking of people who are actively or indirectly being involved with Featherfield through various routes, either through the projects that Featherfield are involved, curatorial projects, exhibitions, outreach projects with schools across London and England, residencies, with artists that spend time in Featherfield Gallery, community projects, and obviously the net behavior. I carried out research, ethnographic research with net behavior for about 12 months, and at that time I gathered about 800 emails between the various active members who were contributing to the different discussions online. I mean, saying about discussions, this is the way that net behavior works is a bit different than Empire. As Simon said, on Empire there are certain themes monthly and invitation to specific contributors. In the case now of net behavior, things are more open. Meaning that you may have some discussion that is kind of managed or maintained by Mark Garrett, who is the main person behind net behavior. And then you may have people uploading information about their own work. We have electronic poets who have, as I circulated their poetry across the, net behavior members. Then we have people who want to discuss current issues in the, in politics, for example. So in 2011, we had as well the riots in Cairo and in North Africa in general. So there was lots of discussion about the particular events and how these how they were reflected on social media and the impact of social media, like Twitter, in the particular sort of kind of riots across North Africa. So this is how more or less net behavior works. The other thing is that as on Empire, most people don't know each other, let's say, or they are friends in offline, but there is a core group of people who know themselves as well offline, and they are active members of Featherfield Gallery as well, and they are present in different and various events and exhibitions organized by Featherfield Gallery. So in a sense, there is a community which is outside the online interface of net behavior, and I think strengthens as well the ties and links on net behavior as well. And then there are friendships that are based only on online communication between people who have never met before. So there is a kind of different levels of establishing, let's say, this community.
Okay. A lot of things to sort of think about and consider. I mean, this kind of relationship between the online community and the communities which are operate in sort of physical spaces. That is probably something to sort of discuss further. But I think we should now continue a little bit with the specific project that Empire is having in July. Maybe Sue and Simon can say a few things about the sort of topic of the discussion. And I would like to sort of add this additional consideration to this, just because I was sort of motivated by the way Caspar uses the Facebook, like the kind of children using Facebook in a sort of live mode. Also, given the interest that all four of us have in studio-based research and practice-based research and all these kinds of things, a little bit to think without wanting to interfere with your project and how you want to run it in July, but I can't I can't hold myself back from wondering whether any workshops could ever happen in Empire, not in that particular session or maybe in the future, whether this idea of the live mode, of communication in a live mode, which of course has the limitations of not having the time to develop a written text of a certain level, which is really important in the work that Empire is producing. Like the texts that are being posted are highly polished and very well thought through, very well referenced, and all these kinds of things. However, the idea of criticality, which is being emphasized in the systems that are working in Empire, can that be approached from a different direction through studio-based methods, which we all know, combined with the Listservs? That's so I'm just going to pass to Simon and Sue now.
Well, I actually think Sue is a better place to talk about this than me. For me, the most important thing about studio-based research is the immediacy of it, and that you're in an environment where everyone is being creative and each in their own way and each with their own skill sets and media and instruments and tools, and they're all communicating in multiple modes. They're not just talking, you know. You're talking, you're using your face, you're pointing, you're making movements, you're making sounds, you're showing pictures, you're creating things all the time, you're making things. And it's all very dynamic, and it's working in many different modes that work with different sensory systems, the human, and trigger different ways of thinking, different ways of absorbing information and analyzing it, critiquing it. And this is where practice-based research is really powerful, because of all those richness, that rich media environment you can create. Which brings us back to what we were talking about before, about this gap between the offline and the online, and how the online is abstract, it's very low band, it's very eye of a needle sort of thing, and the offline, particularly in the example it's giving, is extremely rich. It's massive amounts of information moving around in multiple directions all at the same time. And because of that, well, exhausting, but also highly inspiring. It energizes everybody in the room when it's going well. So that's where I think this question of online, when we're using the word embodiment, it's not my preferred word to use it, but online interaction. That would be the more precise terminology I use. The question of how that can bring value. We've already established that people create communities, online and offline, because they have reasons to. They draw value from it, they contribute value to it, value gets created. That value is something, a fundamental human interaction. And the mediality of that community is very much core to why they're there, and how the value they're creating is being created, and what that value then becomes, and how that value is appreciated subsequently. The question for me is, with something like Oculus Rift, which is one of the first consumer-level high-data multimodal tools that can be used in remote communications, online forums, and things like that. The question is, what is its potential impact? As yet, there's only a few people experimenting with it. If you go onto the BBC last week, you'll see that Oliver Krailos, our collaborators at the University of California, Davis, had a front page write-up on the BBC news website for his work with the Oculus Rift, and he's basically being credited with creating a real holodeck, which was sort of, we were envisaging on one level, technical level, but in fact it's not the most interesting aspect of it. But it is happening in an experimental context. The fact that Facebook have now bought Oculus Rift, the company who make this entry-level consumer device, it's only a few $100 to buy this head-mounted system, virtual reality system. But they bought it, clearly indicates that they're making moves into that area, that Facebook see a significant part of their future in augmented reality, in large-scale remote interactions and collaborations. The fact that Apple have bought PrimeSense, which is the company behind the Microsoft Kinect, which is another key consumer-level virtual reality technology, indicates that Apple are going in that direction. So it's very, to me, it's the writing's on the wall. I think within 3 to 5 years, we're going to see, well, I think in 2 years, we're going to see consumer technologies hitting Facebook and hitting the Apple operating system and Microsoft that will be drawing on this stuff. I think in 5 years, we're going to see mature technologies emerging. We're going to fundamentally shift what we think social media are and how they work and how we interact and what sort of information we can exchange, and the modalities, the sensory modalities, the experiential modalities through which we can do that. And I think the potential to be profound change in a whole lot of different aspects of socialization. Communication in the first instance, socialization in the second instance. So I think it's actually potentially very important developments that are happening right now. And so that's why we wanted to talk about that in July on Empire. But I think Sue wants to say something about what she thinks is the particular importance of, within all of that, multimodality, this thing of embodiment, because that's a very key thing.
Oh, we just lost someone.
Oops.
Who's
Oh,
that?
Hello?
Camera. You
What happened? Hello?
Yeah.
Thea's dropped out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can see you all now.
Yeah, something happened, sorry. It's my laptop.
Okay.
Yeah, the discussion in July is going to be around a notion that we're calling, or is called by some people, virtual embodiment. And we really just want to unpack what people think they mean by that. And because of the timing of a kind of mass consumer company like Facebook being on the verge of adding in some technology to that large community that intends to alter people's experience of their embodied presence, and I guess depending on how it's applied, possibly give them the capacity to have the sense of somebody else's embodied presence. I really wonder, well, the question of virtual embodiment, the people I know so far who've really explored this, other than gaming, I don't know anything at all about gaming, I apologize, but in terms of creative and specifically choreographic practice, the people I know who've explored any kind of virtual embodying technologies or telematic presence systems that permit you to establish something that is sufficiently as if you are there that it alters your experience and augments or alters your sense of your own embodiment. All the people I'm aware of are highly sensitized to movement and highly bodily aware. So in that context, it's really exciting, like what can be added by having complex or indeed simple low bandwidth technologies. For example, having just moved to Australia, I am about to do a project with some people in Edinburgh where we're going to be looking at emailing a dance between ourselves and go back to just writing. We're not going to try, we haven't got the kind of the capacity to have complex technologies, and we don't want the work, the sharing, to be about the technology that will mediate it. We just want to get the messages across. So we're going to see what we can do with extremely low bandwidth. in another instance, it might be really important that we can sense presence. At the moment, that's going to be very complex bandwidth. But if I go back to the point I made earlier about a community like Empire, when we have the discussion, there'll be a specific core group who are going to initiate the discussion, but anybody within the network can contribute at any point. So that there's quite a kind of mass of people, and for me, the idea of meeting in a studio with people I choose and choreographically and dance-wise moving in proximity, that's one kind of contract and one kind of agreement. To be in part of a mob of people is like, wouldn't be something I would choose. So if that were to become kind of virtually embodied, that currently offline, disembodied online space, if it became full of bodies, that for me would be an awful lot more data to deal with. And the nature of the network is I don't even know some of those people I'd be in the space with. So that's, I would assume that would be the same with Facebook, unless it's just the select groups who want to meet, or couples who want to meet, or whatever. Maybe that's the aim. You know, maybe it's about people selecting very specifically. But the great thing about Facebook is how wide it can spread. You know, so
Facebook is not a community per se.
No.
Facebook is a software platform in which communities form, and it's a highly structured platform.
Yeah. No, I agree with Simon. I think there may be smaller communities or people who define that belong to small communities within Facebook, but the Facebook overall is not a community.
Yeah, just as the internet is not a community, but it's full of communities.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just the same as a city is not a community.
Yes.
But it's full of communities.
Yes.
And but nevertheless, places have identities, even if they're not communities. And that's to do with their histories and things like that. But that's another conversation.
Okay. Are there any other things that you would like to add to the topics like that we try to discuss today? Do you feel that this idea of the online community and the different types of the online community have been covered sufficiently?
I think so. I think what I would like to reiterate is that what's of main interest with looking at these communities is trying to understand people, trying to understand why people want to be in these communities and why these communities form as dynamics. You get a lot of insight into humanity by studying and by interacting with them, being creative with them. And I think the creativity involved is really, really important. And here I'm not talking about the creativity of culture, of artists, communities, or such like, but just simple creativity, like skateboarders painting their skateboards, or talking about their latest cool move, you know, their latest backflip or something like that. That's also creativity, and it's just as valuable as the creativity that's put into high art. There's no difference of value there in terms of the creativity per se. There might be differences in terms of its social value, but that's another thing again, which is also a very important subject, but with the remit of our discussion today. To me, it's mainly this realization or insight that people need these communities because it allows them to be creative. That being creative is not something people can do on their own. It's only something they can do with each other. They have to bounce it around. You have to communicate it and get feedback. And creativity is a discursive activity. It's not a solo activity. And that it's through these actions, these creative activities, that people sort of make themselves and make each other.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it's a simple insight, but I think it's very important.
yeah. I agree with Simon because obviously this brings the ontologies of knowledge, creativity, knowledge making, creativity, sharing, and the idea of the creative land that James Leeds, the cultural anthropologist, refers to. But I would really like to add, in relation to net behavior and Featherfield in general, and I think it's of interest to talk about where they are heading toward, to see this in relation to community formation and becoming people as well, is that there is a huge interest in moving towards ideas about the commons and commons in the cultural sphere, and this idea of sharing, collaborating, co-creating, and exchanging, let's say, knowledge as a gift between the members of the community, and together making this knowledge as well evolve. And this is of interest because Featherfield, and it's mentioned briefly earlier on, apart from the gallery, has another space which is called Featherfield Commons, and is a space in physical location in Fisbury Park, but with a particular focus on engaging the local communities of non-digital service and technology service with digital practitioners, and in a very horizontal, let's say, power structure, exchange and share knowledge, different practices to make things happen. And at the same level, I mean, I think net behavior and a couple of discussions are moving around those issues. So it's a quite interesting moment, I think, to see what is a community or an online community or generally a community, and what are the public goods, if we could call this, or translate in that way, the commons are about.
Okay, I just wanted to add a little thing, since we keep talking about the skateboarders. I don't know how this coincidence, and it kind of brings me a little bit into this discussion, just in terms of this project that I've been doing. And in one of the interviews we had with one of the main skateboarders we're working with, this is, by the way, a project I'm doing with my colleague here from the School of Architecture, Ian Scott, and has nothing to do with online communities or anything, but it seems to be relevant. So one of the important things for the skateboarders is the sense of physical space, of how stuff happens when they are all there together, and the kind of energy and the kind of energy and creativity that emerges from this coexistence in that common physical space. And it just makes me think this very simple thing, basically. The idea of the community, of how people's creativity and thinking develops by just being in that community. And
well, this is something we see with children.
Say again, Simon?
When children are playing, we see this, and not just people, but animals. So you watch a David Attenborough program where he's got a camera trained on some baby lions or something, or some baby monkeys, and they're playing and they're learning and they're making themselves, they're developing themselves, and recognizing each other, finessing themselves by watching the other, the Lacanian mirror and all that. This is very important. And of course those skaters are doing the same thing. When we're doing a high-level practice-based research laboratory workshop, we're doing the same thing. And we're probably doing the same thing right now.
So yes, this notion of space, okay, which is actually another part we will try to do a little bit through this symposium, with Penny in a few kind of experiments that we're going to try if we have time tomorrow, and with Daphne Dragona, who is coming from Berlin to join us tomorrow. So maybe this is a good time to end this broadcast and sort of announce that tomorrow at the same time, 10:30 UK time, we'll have another broadcast with Daphne Dragona talking about primarily the project Hybrid Cities, which happened in Athens last year, and some ideas about how to play the network. Okay. So
thanks for asking us, Sophia.
Everybody.
Thanks a lot, Sophia.
Goodbye. I will end the broadcast now and talk to you after the end of it. Okay. Bye.
Bye, Simon and Sue. Nice to talk. Bye.